Welcome to the Trailhead from Ultra Sign Up, where big adventures begin. Trail running is so much more than just a sport. It's a community, a culture, a way of seeing the world. On this show, we're not dissecting splits or debating shoe specs. We're here to get to the heart of it all, the people, the places, and the stories that speak to the soul of the sport. Join me, Zoe and my co-host Brendan Leonard, as we'll bring you conversations with the everyday athletes, local legends, quirky characters, and creative minds who make trail running what it is. Messy, joyful, gritty, and deeply human. Because it's not just about chasing finish lines. It's about the friendships forged on long climbs, the lessons learned in the pain cave, and the weird, wild moments that remind us why this sport is about so much more than the miles. Quick thing before we get rolling. The Trailhead is part of the Ultra Sign Up podcast network, alongside The Buzz with Buzz Burrell and Between Two Pines with Andy and Dom. If you like this one, the odds are you'll really like those too. Go and give them a follow. And while you're at it, follow or subscribe to the Trailhead wherever you're listening. That's actually the thing that helps most because you get notified when a new episode drops, and we get to keep making the show. If you've got a minute, leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts, hit a few of those stars on Spotify, or text an episode to a friend. Okay, on with the show. This episode is brought to you by LMNT, and specifically their new lemonade iced tea flavor, which has been doing some quiet work on a couple of, let's say, low-stakes self-improvement projects of mine this year. Project 1, drink enough water like a person who has been told repeatedly this is something a human body needs. Project 2, stop having coffee at 4 p.m. and then feeling personally betrayed at 11 p.m. when I am still somehow shockingly awake. Lemonade iced tea is conveniently and possibly suspiciously a solution to both. It has 50 milligrams of caffeine from actual tea, which is less than a cup of coffee, plus L-theanine, which is a compound in tea that keeps your nervous system from filing a service complaint, and the same sodium, potassium, magnesium formula as regular LMNT. And it tastes like an Arnold Palmer, like somebody made it on a porch iced tea. As a Southerner, I feel this deeply. It's not the kind of beverage where you can taste the optimization and it goes down as smooth as a liquid TED Talk. Go to drinklmnt.com/ultrasignup for a free sample pack with any order. That's drinklmnt.com/ultrasignup.
So Zoe, our guest today, Emily Balcetis, I gave this TED Talk in 2014, which is 11 years ago now. And one of the takeaways I got from it was highly motivated people see the finish line of a race as being closer, regardless of their fitness level, which I thought was great because I think of ultramarathoners being a variety of fitness levels, like we can all do the same thing. But what does that say to you? What do you think about that?
Whenever my partner crews me for races, usually in the last 25 miles or so, the last marathon, because this is what my life is, he calls the look I get tractor beaming because I get hyper-focused, almost a non-verbal state of being. And that's what it feels like because I get so just focused on the finish line. Even though I'm hours away from the finish line, I'm like, I'm almost there. And then I'm in that state of almost being there for 4 to 6 hours. How does that play out for you?
Do
you get the tractor beam?
Depends on the race, but I don't really see it as being very close ever. I'm highly motivated to have the experience. I think you're more highly motivated to go faster and like place and, get money and stuff like that. And,
so much, dozens of dollars a year.
Yeah, I'm just highly motivated. I'm just like, I just want to stop, dude. Get here. And then I'm surprised when it shows up. Like, oh, there it is. Oh, now I can run. But yeah, it's tough. I also, when there's 25 miles left, I have so many more hours left than you do. It's like, we're doing two different sports at that point.
But time really does work. And I love ultras because I do running for long periods of time. Thank God I've found this sport. And I feel like I spend a good portion of any race just being like, oh, I'm so excited to be out here. I love the process. I'm really running the mile I'm in. And then that last quarter of any race, I'm like, I need this to be done yesterday.
Right.
How is the
Right.
finish line not any closer? And I
Yes.
waffle back and forth between being like, this is beautiful, I'm so connected to earth and my body, and then the last few hours being like, I need to be done so bad. If I have to eat another gel, I'm gonna explode.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of research our guest has done about like visual attention while running. And, it's like one of the things said that runners who run more miles each week use wide attention more often than narrow in long distance races. And I was like, well, yeah, man, you're out there for like a whole day. You're going to get bored. You're not just like, boom, straight down the middle of the trail.
When you're doing races, how do you try to chunk things up?
Man, that's probably something I should think about, I guess. I don't know. I take off too fast with people. And then because I think in the middle of the pack, you're sort of like, you don't really get out of the glut of runners as quickly, maybe. And you're like, you kind of like, there's always this like, oh, should I pass this person? Should I hang back? Whatever. That's something I have a problem with, going too fast in that. But then, I don't know. I'm like trying to get to the next aid station usually. And maybe, I take a couple photos, maybe I don't stop and take photos, but I'm like kind of clicking away and thinking about stuff. But yeah, like there's the halfway point. What am I going to do? Maybe. But yeah, I don't know. It's certain climbs, maybe I know when I'm 2/3 done or 3/4 done or when the last big climb is finished and when I can just run. But yeah, I don't know. What do you tell your clients to do?
Go aid station to aid station or snack to snack. I think like thinking of things in that sort of distinct, what do I need to do now to take care of myself so that I'm taken care of when inevitably shit gets weird down the line? And when I'm doing hundreds, the way that things get broken down into for me is like the first 50K is like my fun, chatty 50K. I try to make a friend. I try to particularly meet another woman, like get her number, connect on, like make a friend. And then the middle third, it's like, okay, I'm going to get closer to myself. I'm going to get to know myself. And then the final third is usually when I'm spending time in the fifth dimension.
That's when I hate myself. After I've gotten to know myself, I hate myself.
That is usually when I get so tired of my own thoughts. I'm like, oh my God, being inside this brain is excruciating. I need to be done. No amount of carbohydrates is going to make this tolerable.
No, nothing will help except the end.
Get ready for the Haul Ass Ultra Running Festival, Saturday, June 6th in Erie, Colorado. The name is doing a lot of work here, and yeah, that's kind of the point. Haul Ass is the rare race that doesn't ask you to suffer with a straight face. There are 8 distances on the menu: a 50-miler, 50K, 10K, 5K, and a 3, 6, 9, and 12-hour timed events, which means you can bring your half marathon friend, your training partner who's 3 months deep into a Leadville build, your couch to 5K coworker, and your spouse who keeps insisting they used to run in college and somehow you can all finish. The format is genuinely rare. Most races make you commit to a specific distance 6 months out, sign a small contract with your future self, and then pray that your training cooperates. Haul Ass lets you show up Saturday morning, look at the sky, and decide how much you feel like running. The timed events go one better. Just keep going till you don't wanna. Erie sits in that sweet spot on the Front Range. It's a quick drive from Denver, Boulder, or Fort Collins. Wide open, gorgeous prairie running, easy logistics, and early June timing that's basically a love letter from your calendar. Dialed in from your winter base, but before the real heat shows up to ruin everyone's summer. Bring your people, run as far as you want to. Sign up at ultrasignup.com.
Hi, I'm Emily Balcetis. I'm an associate professor of psychology at New York University and author of Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World.
So, can you give us a little bit about your background? How did you get into this field of study? Why was this interesting for you?
Yeah, I could go all the way back, or I could go just a little ways back. But,
let's go all the way.
All the way. Okay, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of America, and like every child is so desperate to get out of wherever they had spent their growing up years. Doesn't matter how good or how bad it is. Everybody wants a difference. That was the case for me too. And I didn't go that far. I ended up staying in the state of Nebraska, actually to go study music. I studied music with David Knapp at the University of Kearney, smack dab in the middle of the state that's in the middle of America, because I want to be a rock star. Honestly, I had a band. I had a rock band, like pop, ska, punk, mostly cover band in high school, and it was so fun. And we got to sit in with one of our legends who happened to be touring and didn't have their horn line with them at the time. So we got to play this show when I was like 16 or 17 years old for 15,000 people at the Warped Tour. And it was just like the best moment of my life. I've gotten married and like had kids since then, but so like there's other things as a grown up, but so, like
we all peaked in the age of ska. I feel like that's pretty universal.
Thank you. You understand them.
Warped Tour 2006 was my peak for sure.
Awesome. Mine was 97. Yeah. So that was amazing, but it didn't work out. I mean, like obviously I don't have enough tattoos. I don't do drugs, so like I wasn't gonna make it in that world. Actually, my music teacher that I went to study with had a major stroke when he was just in his mid-30s, and it paralyzed the whole left side of his body. And it was just a fluke. And he had been training on the Olympic cycling team. It was just a fluke that nobody saw coming, but was just debilitating. And he has done amazing things with his life since then. He has recreated instruments to be able to play one-handed, and created a whole new industry and opportunity for otherly abled musicians as well. But for me, it did mean that at like probably two of the most formative years of my musical studies, I lost my teacher. So I went on with psychology, which I also had been studying and also really loved. And then I like definitely wanted to get out of Nebraska. So I got an atlas and made a list of all the states that touch oceans, and then cross-referenced that with a guide to graduate school in psychology, and listed all the programs that were in the states that touched oceans and applied to all of them. And then ended up getting my PhD in psychology, social psychology at Cornell, in upstate New York, in Ithaca, New York, which is a gorgeous place, but nowhere near the ocean, in a state that like technically meets the requirements, but like couldn't be further from what the dream was. So it was also a great school, it was a great training. And then now I've been a professor for 20 years, and the last 17 of them have been at New York University. So I'm not a clinical psychologist. I can't analyze, Zoe, your background with your mother and like what happened there.
That's too bad, because we do have a tendency to try to use this podcast for free therapy sessions, so we'll have to.
Well, I'm happy to go there. It's just completely
off-label.
Yeah, exactly. Off-brand, off-label. But as a social psychologist, a behavioral scientist, thinking about and talking about people is what we do, using the tools of science to try to understand what can, and in my research in particular, help us to understand what helps people meet their goals, what stands in the way, and how can we open up people's toolkits to give them more tools to get further, faster, farther.
Yeah, you're author of the book, Clearer, Closer, Better, where you look at how people's psychological state, our emotions, our motivation literally changes our perception and what we see. When did you first start seeing kind of the beginnings of that idea in your research, and what did that look like?
I think anytime anybody's asked that question about what they do, that's like the hardest one. When was the first moment? I feel like we all just are kind of like stumbling along, and sometimes things like click and you explode forward, and sometimes you just keep stumbling and maybe you forget them, or you just keep stumbling, and that's fine too. So I don't know. I could give you an answer, but to be honest, it has been just like stumbling forward and seeing what clicks. But one I'd say like of the work that's really relevant to you and to your audience, I gave a TED talk 10 years ago or so, and it was about some of the work that we had done on exercising, really like lab-based studies on how do you help people to run faster and get them to move harder, so be more efficient with their exercise. And can we scale that up to people who might be really struggling, who are struggling with their weight, who are struggling with their health? And are those similar or different tools than what helps people who've already felt like they've accomplished those goals that they might have related to managing health and fitness? And so that was, a lot of the research went into that TED talk, and it got a lot of attention, including the attention of a physical therapist who was working with this really cool running club so I'm in New York City. It's a running club that's in Brooklyn. And they meet in this old armory building, which, lots of cities have them. They're just cool to see, like, plopped around New York City. These things that used to be military houses, right? Housing for military armament. So beautiful old brick structures, big domed tops. Tanks would have been hanging out in there in the olden days, but they no longer do tanks roam the streets of New York City. And most all of them have been repurposed into something else, like maybe artist gallery space, or in this case over in Brooklyn, to a YMCA. So this beautiful old building is now a family-friendly institution for health and access. But there's a running club that trains in there, and this physical therapist works with that club. They're called Zenith Velocity. And they're a really accomplished running club led by a coach who has just like a magical way of motivating his athletes. And they're incredibly successful. A lot of them come from the Caribbean. His runners, he works with male runners. You know, many of them have won medals at the Olympic Games. They trained along Usain Bolt and won gold, silver, bronze medals. And so there's some of the fastest men in the world that are hanging out alongside moms pushing strollers in the wintertime in this old armory in Brooklyn. And so this physical therapist said, hey, come along. Why don't you can talk to these guys and see if the techniques that you've been studying, do they resonate with these guys? Are they helpful? Do they use them? Do they even know what they're doing? And so it was just this like cool introduction that he made. And these guys were so humble. I was so scared because like, oh my God, they're like, I wonder if they're going to wear their Olympic medals. No, of course they
Sprinters
don't, right?
scare me too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what I thought is like, these are amazing humans. They probably have superpowers of perception. They probably like have eyes on the back of their head, or at least some equivalent. They're constantly like tracking where they are with respect to their goal, with respect to the competition, with respect to their different marks that they're trying to hit. And I was completely wrong with what I discovered in working with them. These sprinters say really what they do is like keeping their eyes on the prize. That was like a metaphoric phrase that seemed to make sense and resonates with people, almost as if they have blinders on, the like horses in urban areas, right? They are just focused on one target. That's it. They are not tracking their competition. They have just found one mark and they keep their eyes focused on it until they hit it and they pass it and then they reset their mark. And that was like really different than what I thought they might be telling me. But as I like delved into that more, I realized that it's not just sprinters that do that, but like marathon runners also. Joan Benoit Samuelson was the first woman to win a marathon, the first time women were ever allowed to run marathons.
Shockingly recently.
Yeah, like since I've been alive, it's not like, I mean, it's the olden days, but still, like I was there for that in life.
Back when we thought women would just like self-immolate if we allowed them to exercise like 40 years ago.
Right. Exactly. About 40 years ago. Like, what do they think? They're going to take up their crochet needles or something and just like knit everybody into a big blanket and not actually do the race? No, she's amazing.
The feminine urge to knit your competitors into a quilt.
I'm sure that has been done. Maybe not the competitors, but knitting while running. And so when I just like read interviews with her, like what techniques does she use? She uses the same technique actually for long distance running. She finds a mark, might be a woman in a pink shorts up ahead of her, focuses on that till she hits that mark, passes it, resets it, and uses this narrowed attentional strategy and talks about that kind of doing that more towards the end of the marathon, last couple miles of it. So probably, getting to read about, learn about, work with some of these superstars was really probably what exploded all of the research in this area that I've done. And happy to talk more about what we found. So,
yeah, it's so interesting because Anne Trayson, who's sort of the fairy godmother of ultra running, one of the first really prominent American women in distance running, particularly at the 100-mile distance, she said that her strategy for running 100 miles is just going tree to tree, which is, I think, like a pretty phenomenal way of, when you talk about like running a 100 miler is trying to eat an elephant bite by bite, that, tree to tree is that bite by bite. But essentially in your research, you found that two people can look at the same thing and literally see it differently because of their level of physical fitness, because of their own motivations. So how does that happen?
Yeah. So that general principle that you just brought up, this like changing the perceptual experience, inducing a visual illusion or something, really is the secret sauce. It is the magic powder, but it's not magic. It's science and it's motivation. And so what we found is that when we take that tree-to-tree approach, or keep your eyes on the prize, or the blinders, they're all just different metaphors for talking about how do you orient to the world. Choosing a target, focusing on it, and ignoring the peripheral vision. that induces an illusion of proximity. That target that you're focused on now appears closer to you than it would if you were paying attention to the periphery, assuming a wider focus of attention, almost as if you've taken a spotlight, hold it up, and now the light can diffuse across a greater surface area. Instead, dropping that spotlight down, focusing it in, changing its diameter, that narrowed focus of attention induces an illusion of proximity. It looks closer to you. And it's not just like, I think it's closer, but your visual experience changes such that your eyes and your brain and how that works together is pulling it in closer to you. Now, what would that do? Well, we can think about what would that do. Do you get a high when you see that finish line, and are you like pushing for it? You can think about when you're almost finished any other goal. You've got a big project for work that you've been working on and you've got the last 2 days. Do you double down on your efforts then? Or do you just sort of like, give up and you're not even sure if you complete it? Maybe you turn it into your boss, maybe you don't. No, you get it done, right? When the finish line is in sight, when the finish line feels close, we can double down on our efforts. And that is what's happening. So when you take that narrowed focus of attention, it induces an illusion of proximity, and it has a cascade effect on our motivational states. Now, it feels like this is a challenge, pushing through to the finish line. It's a challenge that I can take on, that I'm excited to take on, that isn't a threat now or producing uncertainties. I have a higher sense of self-efficacy, and it also produces like a physiological mobilization. When things look close to us, our body is preparing itself mentally and physically to find that last burst of energy that we need. So we can do that for ourselves by shifting the way that we look. We can induce the illusion of proximity, and we can create this change that we need to burst forward.
How does that, I'm thinking of like mile 19 of a marathon, which is legendarily like,
the wall.
the hardest. How would you explain that in helpful terms as to that? You can't quite see the finish line, but it's close. But like, what should we do to ourselves at that point?
Right. Yeah. So that's when you need a big tool belt, right? Because there might not be just one tool that works for everybody to push through to get that job done of pushing through the hardest part. There was a cool analysis that was done of New York City marathon runners and like dropout rates, and where exactly are the dropout rates the highest.
Oh.
And like logically, it would seem like as the race gets further, as it continues to get harder, the dropout's going to steadily increase, almost like a linear function, like a line. Like, probably no one can get into the marathon is going to drop out in the first couple of miles, and maybe not even by the first 10 or something. But once you get closer to the end, it's just going to consistently rise. But that's not the case. The wall is the wall. That's a big point of dropout. But once people get past the wall, there's no dropout. I mean, there is, but there's like, it's like whoosh, right? So it's not just that like as people differentially deplete their physiological resources, as the glucose drops and as all of the pasta's been burned off, it's not just that, because now it really is about the mind and how we push ourselves mentally, even when we continue to deplete ourselves physiologically. So if it all depended on our body, as we continue past the wall 19 and beyond, we're getting more and more tired. We're losing our depleting our stores of energy. That dropout should continue to increase, but it doesn't, because now it's about how are people, despite the lack of physiological resources, harnessing their psychological resources to continue to push through. So that's why, as a behavioral scientist, that the wall is a fascinating thing, because it tells us about the importance of our mental state and these psychological tools that we have at our disposal. So,
one of the things I always love looking at with ultra running, finishing, I like 100 milers is just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't held enough as a kid. I'm, a different podcast, but we collect a lot of data at Ultra Sign Up. And I always love looking at the groupings of finish times, because there are always two distinct groupings. So like a sub 24-hour 100 miler is kind of like a big deal. Like for a lot of people, that's kind of like the sub 4-hour marathon or like a BQ sort of thing. And when you look at 100-mile finish times, regardless of terrain, regardless of how many competitors there are or whatever, there's a huge group of people that finish right under 24 hours. And then there's another group that finishes like right under 30 hours if the cutoff or like the time when the race is over is at 30 hours, which that's not explained by physiology. That's explained by psychology, which I find so interesting, because were it not for the brain, you wouldn't see those two huge distinct clusters right there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great data. And like I'm not a part of the ultra running community, but I had a chance to talk with somebody who went from obese to within 1 to 2 years competing in these ultra marathons over and over and over again. Like that's an incredible transformation. And it is about like collecting data, like all of that data. He's a scientist too, so maybe that was already. He was already.
We do attract a lot of people who like to get freaky in the spreadsheets in this sport.
Yeah, right. And he was like tracking his shoes, and that was a lot of it too. Of like his 24 of the same pairs of shoes, all numbered because they're exactly the same and the same color and all of that. But tracking how many miles in each shoe, and so I was like, oh, that's like an interesting also form of I don't know, like superstition or something. Like can't change the color of the shoe, but yeah. But he was talking about like so this tracking everything about his practice. And being able to visualize that in his own mind. So like that's a technique too. When you're like the doubts start to creep in, or you need your first little hit of motivational push. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I can see my data in my own head. I know that I can do this. I know that I have done it, right? So if you're starting to doubt, that is one point of that visualization of past success can help create that efficacy. But if we talk about like, Joan Benoit Samuelson and others who are running marathons, like let's not poo-poo that, even though we're talking about 100 miles. Those are still like incredible feats that most people can't accomplish. But that technique is one that that she talked about using more towards the end. And as this narrowing of attention, the tree by tree, eat the elephant bite by bite. It's not something that we're using in the beginning because it's a tool that is depleting. First of all, it takes effort and control to like continue to set a mark and hold engagement on it until you pass it and reset it. So if you did that for the entire time, it would be exhausting for you. But it's a tool that when we need a tool, that's another one that is available. And we have worked with thousands and thousands of runners at this point, and we can, break down what are the strategies, what are the visual strategies that they are using. And consistently across all the studies, what we find is that narrowing of attention is something that faster runners do more than slower runners consistently, but also they increase their use of it over time as the race progresses to a steeper degree. So it's a tactic that they seem to be employing more so towards the end than the beginning, and just sort of more so overall. And, your community is incredible athletes. So are they using the wrong techniques? No, I'm sure they're not. They wouldn't be able to do any of this if they're using the wrong techniques.
You're using something. That's for sure.
Yeah. So distraction. I mean, when you talk about when you just talk to people who are trying to get in the game, I just got to figure out how to distract myself. I need to have like a super killer podcast that's on. I need, all these like, music that's at the right tempo and stuff. Or I need to start listening to War and Peace so that I can get through 24 hours on the audio book. It's like, okay, so it's distraction.
More of a Dostoevsky girl, but sure, yeah.
Okay. So distraction, when do we use it? But when do we not? And when is it an impediment to us? And when is like listening to that book on tape not actually going to help us push through when our body starts screaming or the demands change? We need to be able to switch out the tools.
I'm curious, what motivational tools do you see beginners gravitate towards that might be less effective? Like you've studied things that do work. I'm curious if there's anything that has come out in the research that's like, this thing that often people reach for at the beginning is less effective or maybe even detrimental.
Yeah. The American Psychological Association did a study of like what is willpower? How do you try to motivate yourself? And the most commonly used tactics are, I talk to myself in encouraging ways. Maybe put Post-it notes on your mirror to remind yourself of like, I can do this. And maybe that works. Maybe you like reset those Post-it notes every day, or I remind myself of the importance of the goal especially when I start to doubt it. So those are two big ones, but those are effortful. They take a lot of work. Like when you're down in the dumps, okay, now I have to like pull up a different part of my brain and like convince myself that you can do it, but I feel like I can't, but no, you can do it. It's like yin and yang in the same brain at the same time. That's really tough to do. Okay, I'm wondering if I can accomplish it. Just remember, this is why you're doing it. Okay, it's like this like why is so distant from my troubles right now that is leading me to ask for help from my own brain. Again, it's a yin and yang of like asking for more resources when I feel like I don't have them to begin with. And those are for those reasons, because it's like pulling thin resources in a time of need with something that is effortful and challenging to do. that's why I think it doesn't work. So we have to figure out ways that call upon different resources or that are more automated, that are ones that don't require us to think and work so hard to push through when we're, at our least able, when we're least resourced to be able to do that. So what are strategies? Another one is called implementation intentions. Let's first back up and say foreshadowing failure. That is one. Thinking through the obstacles, right? So when we're super excited, we're setting goals, we're making sub goals, and we're coming up with the concrete steps that we can take so that we know, like, very discreetly and concretely, what do I need to do to make progress on the sub goal, to know if I'm tracking against my larger goal. I'm sure we do that. But when we do that and we're excited about it, like, look, here's my plan of action. Let's go. I'm ready. We also need to think about what are the ways that it might not work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that might seem like totally Debbie the Downer when you're experiencing a high from having figured out and charted your course of action. But if we think about that as like coming up with the safety nets, maybe it's more palatable and it can be something that we integrate into our goal setting. So, okay, what could happen? All right, I could pull a hamstring. I could have thrown up the night before, and so I don't actually have all the calories in my body okay, what am I going to do? And have those plans. And then in case those things happen. And then once we have come up with those safety nets, then we phrase them in a particular way. And this is all work done by my colleagues at New York University. Phrase it as if then. If I pull a hamstring, then. If I throw up the night before, then. So that we, because that if then framework is one that sticks in our brain, and it automatically pairs the problem with the solution. And so we want to have to be creatively thinking about, what am I going to do now? Okay, give myself like 4 options if I throw up, but like which one is the right one and which one is feasible right now? But by doing this, if this thing happens, if I throw up, but then I already know, okay, I just threw up. Okay, then I do this.
Whenever I'm coaching, I do some coaching with particularly ultra runners, and I find, especially with new people, there's sometimes like a reluctance to, I call it doing the pre-post-mortem, like what are the ways you think you might fail? And sometimes particularly new people are like really hesitant to be like, here are the things that can go wrong, because they don't want to like manifest it. And so they're like, I can't even go there. Like failure is not an option, but realistically failure is always an option. And so I always find that like identifying like, if I throw up, what do I do? And like naming the things that you're afraid will happen and like creating that flow chart of actions will help when inevitably some stuff does come up, because it's ultras. And I feel that like the more experienced you get, maybe even the like less nervous you are around those potential pain points when you're out there.
Yeah, that's great. The pre-post-mortem, I love that. And just think like, okay, this is an effective strategy. Zoe uses it. Zoe is teaching people to use it. We can
so
also
it's a good strategy.
Yeah, right? We would be listening to you if we didn't believe what you had to tell us. So.
She has a podcast. She must be right.
Yeah, but it's a strategy that other athletes in other sports use as well. And that's what their coaches have them do, is just think about what could happen. And part of their training is to practice the worst case scenario so that, God forbid, hope it doesn't, but it might when you're at the Olympics happen to you. You already know how to push through, and you know that you can. You can pivot quickly because microseconds in some sports determine the difference between being on a podium and not. And so you don't have time to try to think through and psychologically get yourself over the like, oh, is this a failure moment? I didn't think I was supposed to fail. Failure's not an option. That could take 3 seconds. It could take 3 hours to push through that, but you don't have that kind of time. And so you need to already know, what am I going to do? Okay, this thing happened. I already thought about it. I know how to pivot.
Emily, you've published a lot of different studies on a lot of different topics in a lot of different areas. I was wondering if you could talk about, I guess this might be just the YMCA story you told us, but how did running first enter into the research? Like, how did you start how did runners come into your research? And was that like a personal thing you were doing? Were you running and being like, oh, well, maybe this is a thing?
Life is different now. It's like, life is constantly evolving. So I was trail running when I was up in Ithaca, and I'm playing a lot of soccer. It's a really international city. Soccer is such a big deal, and co-ed teams just meant there's never enough women on the field. So you could play like 3 games back to back. So I was in like great shape and physically in great shape in graduate school. Psychologically, I don't know, always takes a toll on you to get your PhD. And it's just a beautiful place. So there's lots of hills to go running and trails to run through. And it was just exhilarating, as your audience knows, right? To be kind of on the brink of death, at least for me, as I'm trail running, like, when is that next route going to get me? And I'm going to go over this cliff and end up in that lake instead. And at that time, when I didn't have children or responsibilities to other humans, it was like, yeah, I love this thrill. Now it's like, I can't, like, they need me. My husband doesn't know how to make them any food. So if I die, they might also.
Second husband in 2 days we've talked to who cannot cook.
There's women who don't either in New York.
I know.
But yeah, you're not hiding those.
We can be crappy in the kitchen too. Yes, we can.
Yeah, exactly.
I am also incompetent.
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah,
I can't make toast. Yeah.
Yes, we can. My dad was our home chef growing up. Whenever my mom would try, it was inedible. Even pasta, we're like, geez, what is this sauce you put on pasta? How did you mess that up? And I remember one time, even when we were like teenagers, like this, wanting to be polite, but it was so disgusting. We just all had to go and rinse the noodles off, and we all just ate plain pasta because like whatever she did to that was like. Anyway, so women can be terrible too, but I had great parents and I love them both. So there we go, back with the family therapy stuff. But your question, how did I get interested in runners? Because it's just great. It's a great activity, and be open access to all kinds of individuals that you can start at any point in your life, and is highly effective for longevity and for overall physical health. Like, it gets your heart rate up really fast, and you can feel it, right? 20 minutes in, all of a sudden, like, whether you've only run a couple times or you've run for a couple decades, within 20 minutes, it can give you an instant high that is healthy and legal. That was one thing. My research team that was involved in this work were runners and competing for marathon titles, and at that time too. I don't know. It just sometimes it happens. We just bumble along and bumble through that.
Is there like runners tend to have pretty, I guess I feel like maybe simple goals or like straightforward goals and like they're easy to track as opposed to like one person on a basketball team psychologically. Does that make any sense? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you could turn the question around too and be like, why do people like team sports? There's so much to coordinate, right? But collective effervescence is a thing. Why do we ever run races? Why don't we just keep tracking against ourselves? Like, even runners like to run in the presence of other people. And why is that? Because they want to beat them all, because they like the collective effervescence, this energy and feeling that you only get by being in the presence of people who are doing something, who share your values, share in your experience right now, feeling good alongside you, makes you feel better. It's like, it's more than just the sum of its parts. So is running individual? As a team sport, just a team sport? No, you wouldn't get on the team. You won't stay on the team. You won't enjoy the team if you aren't putting your own individual effort. So what people get out of it, people might come to it for different reasons. And certainly there's different elements that you can't track as an individual versus a group. But when you try to unpack the psychology of it, I think there are components that are both individual and intra-individual, group-oriented and individually oriented, that keep people going and give different sources of motivation and reward.
You sort of you hinted at the idea of willpower earlier, maybe being something that's a little bit overrated in the research, as maybe not actually being as sustainable a source of motivation as other things. And, thinking of a lot of like maybe newer runners or folks like sort of newer to ultra running as a sport, what advice do you have for folks that are maybe struggling with motivation and they're just trying to like white knuckle or like willpower their way to better fitness or to better goals?
Yeah, if the concept of willpower, if you like it and you feel like it's serving you well, go ahead and hold on to it. If you're willpower questioning or willpower curious, and you might think of it as a metaphor, right? We don't have to throw out the word. It's a good metaphor. But what is it? So as a scientist, we try to operationalize, which means let's take these abstract concepts and make them concrete and measurable. And I think that's a good practice for everybody to do, to think about willpower or whatever word you want to use for how you make it through and how you describe your successes, is to operationalize it. Well, what is willpower? If we just say it's the positive self-talk, well, first of all, let me back up. If we call it willpower and something doesn't work out and we say like, oh, I guess I didn't have willpower, it's like you either have it or you don't. If you just leave your analysis there, like this is about willpower and I'm going to power through, I'm going to willpower through it. It doesn't work out. You didn't hit your mark, you didn't hit the goal, or you didn't finish the race. Like, it can be this fixed way of thinking that leads you feeling like a lack of belonging. I guess I don't have what it takes. I don't have willpower. But it's like, well, I don't think about willpower in a different way. If willpower is really about flexibility in the tools that we use, and that's willpower, is changing my strategies or having multiple strategies and being aware of those, and knowing when to throw in the towel on one and to switch to another, then that's just about trying something new. And this was an experience about learning, not about diagnosing whether you have what it takes or you have the willpower or you don't. So when we do the post-post-mortem and we think about what contributed to success and what contributed to failure, I really caution against thinking about these things that are like entities. I have this or I don't, but instead of something that I can develop and I've learned along the way. And anything that leads us to start putting labels on ourselves, which I think is part of the problem of thinking about willpower, it feels like it's either the thing that you have or you don't. You either have 6 feet or you have 5.5 feet of body, and that's it. Like, there's not much you can do about it, right? And there's not much you can do about that. And willpower, I think, puts us in that camp too, where it feels like probably disengagement is higher when we start thinking in these entity labeling kinds of ways.
So like rather thinking of it as like an identity thing of like I am this way or I'm not, thinking of it as like a capacity that you can grow or expand over time. How can people grow that motivation or grow that, I guess, ability to do the work that's required of getting better at running, which is just running more, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I think there's more than just running. I think like you yourself, Zoe, you're a coach, right? Like, so finding a coach that can help you see it from another perspective or open up an insight that might be challenging for you to find yourself. Social support is important. So Brendan, you talked about like you were inclined to say that this is an individual support, sport, but what if it's not, right? And what if your inclination is to think that it is? What happens if you think that it's not? And instead, try it out with an accountability buddy, or you try running with somebody else. Does that do something different for you? Is that a way to grow your willpower or your belief in your own ability to do this? Trying out new tactics and being open to that, I think is really important. And I mean, you already talked about how this community is really data driven and loves stats. So great. When I suggest like become your own accountant, that probably resonates with people. And I suggest that keep all the data that you can. And when I went through this exercise for other goals that I was working on and tried it with a group of my students also, we just used the Reporter app. There's lots of apps like this that you can set up on your phone to ping you randomly throughout the day. You tell it how many times during what time periods. It should pop up a notification and ask you basically to complete a survey that you designed. And so I decided when my first child was born that I was a boring person now because all I could talk about was like diapers and sleeping. And what happened to me? I used to be cool or at least fun, but like it's so boring. I'm bored myself. So it's like, I'm going to become a drummer. That's what I need to do. When I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my husband and a baby, and I'm going to become a drummer, a rock drummer with neighbors that are going to, that I wanted to. So like that will make me cool again, or for the first time. But I have a musical background, but not on drums. That's not what I studied. And I can't coordinate my limbs, and I can't coordinate 4 of them. I mean, 2 of them fine, but like 4 doing different things. So this was an uphill battle for me. So I set my phone, so I was going to play a show. I had set a show. I'm going to play publicly. So I got to learn this thing. People are coming already. They're like, so I'm doing that. So I set my phone like, hey, did you practice? Since last time I asked you, did you practice drums? And if yes, how did you feel about it? And I did that for a month. And at that month, I was like, I've made no progress. I know, like, I keep telling my phone, no, I haven't practiced drums. I feel awful. Okay. Like, this is going to be a total embarrassment. And I hate that I did this to myself, but I already told my book editor that I'm going to do this. So like, I have to, there's no backing out. The audience is coming and the book editor knows she's going to hear a story about me learning to play the drums. But so also at the end of that month, my brain told me, you've made no progress. When I looked at my data, I downloaded it from the app. I actually found out something that I hadn't expected before, which is I practiced 8 times in a month. I didn't practice 32 other times that it asked me, which is that negativity dominance, 32 times of saying, no, I didn't practice, is far bigger than the 8 times that I did. But from the outset, it's like in a month's time, I practiced like each day of the weekend. Like, that's actually not that bad. It's not my day job, right? And like, that's pretty good. But I still didn't improve at all, at least I thought. But when I tracked my response to the question, like, how did you feel about it? At first it was like, it's awful, I hate myself, I cried, to like, actually got a compliment. That was fun. It's like, wow, that's like markedly different. I mean, it's not to the point of like, you are a drummer, like, go get him, girl. It was like, but it was progress that I couldn't feel myself because our brains are set up in a way by design to not have us remember everything. We can't remember everything. We level
Thank
and
God.
yeah, right? Thank God. I wish my brain worked the other way. It just remembered my successes. In this case, it remembered my anxieties. And all our brains do that. It latches onto some information that's relevant to a story that we have going on right now, and it forgets the rest. So if we just try to rely on our memory to track our own progress and our successes and whether we feel up to it, it's not going to get it right. So becoming our own accountant and trying to offload our memory elsewhere so that we can take a step back and get the picture from the 35,000 foot mark, we might see things that we can't just pull up on our own and help us better calibrate how we are doing with respect to our goals.
Because one of the strategies that you put forward in your book is...
Can I interrupt
Oh,
real
yeah.
quick?
Yeah. Get in there,
How
Brendan.
did the show go?
Yeah, there were a couple shows in the end. Well, and one was, the show is fine. I made merch and like, I even like put $10 bills on the merch to be like, hey, just like take the merch. And in fact, I'll pay you to take it. And so it's just awful. So I was just kind of like, well, that was disappointing. I like can't even give away money if they have to take the shirt with it. So whatever, I played, it was fine. But then like soon thereafter, I went to go to some other, I flew across the country to some other organization's big like conference, and I was a keynote speaker at it. And the guy who organized the conference was like, let's hear from Emily. Doesn't she do great? Okay, she taught us some important things. And like, before I got off stage, he was like, hey, and in your book, you talk about how you're a drummer. And this was like teachers and superintendents and principals of schools and talking about goal setting. And he's like, we got a party tonight to celebrate all of these amazing teachers. And there's a band coming in from LA. Why don't you sit in with the band and you can play? And I was like, oh my God. And he said, don't you want to? Don't you want to play drums? And I was like, no, I really don't want to. But I just told all these people, try these strategies. And I'm like, you could be successful too. So I better sit in with the band. So I did, sat in with the band. I played my song. And the bass player was like, yeah. And I was like, never felt better. I got a compliment from the bass player. Only later to find out my husband was there too. And he told him, like, she's super nervous. So then this guy probably lied to me about it being good. But I did it. And the audience danced. They applauded. They cheered for me. And I didn't throw up. So I guess it was a success.
Is there any sort of psychological term for that strategy or what happened where you got up in front, like you got on stage doing a skill you were not sure with pretty high consequences? Is there a term for that at all? For that tactic?
Overconfidence?
Okay.
Or I don't know, just bravery. I feel like I say yes more than I say no to things. And lots of times things are a flop. But even if they're a flop, they make a good story at the end. Maybe especially when they're a flop, they can make for better stories. So sometimes it's just to go, like looking for silver linings. And I think I just expect more silver linings than gold medals to begin with.
I love
Plus,
that. Silver linings over gold medals.
Yeah, there you go.
So, sort of thinking about that, like making these goals visual, one of the strategies you put forth in your book is materialize, making plans and making that progress visible. Why does externalizing what's in our heads change how we approach a goal? How is that important?
Again, because I think of these biases in our memory, because our brains are set up to not remember everything. And so if we rely on our brain to do everything, like monitor what we're doing right now, monitor what we have to do in the future, monitor who we're responsible to others, and then also be doing all of the work of trying to motivate ourselves through all of that, it's just overload. Multitasking is really challenging. There's costs in switching. So the more that we can just try to take our brain out of it and let something else do the work for us, the odds of success are better. Also about the visual part, I think is really interesting because our eyes are just super special. There's more neurological real estate in our brain that is responsible for processing vision than any other sense. Like more brain space is allocated to vision than smell, to taste, than hearing, than to all the other senses. And, we can see remarkably well. Like you can see a flickering candle 15 miles off if it was in, in the dark and raised up enough that you could get over the curvature of the earth. Like that's incredible. You can see the International Space Station 300 miles in the sky. It's not like crazy big, right? But like we can see that. We can see these things. So our eyes are special, but also the way that our brain makes sense of what our eyes are doing is also really unique. It's tied directly to our motor responses. We have we have impulses that are tied to what we're seeing. We can feel anxiety and fear. For me, it's like seeing a snake out in the nature. If I see it, then I have snake jar. I see snakes before anyone else sees them. And when I do, I have a heart attack every single time. And it's not because I had to think like, oh, that is a snake. Feel fear, start sweating and scream now. No, it's just like instant, right? Because our eyes are connected to our motor systems in a way that other things are not. Taste is not, smell isn't. There's a delay, right? So if we want to try to make things faster, if we want to try to automate what's happening, why not use our power of sight? It's a superpower that we have, and that a lot of it is working automatically, independently, but we can train it and control it and use it as a tool to our advantage. And so by materializing, that is one thing that we can do, is that we can curate our visual world, see something that's going to automatically prompt a behavioral response that's in alignment with what we ultimately might want. I was talking with a CEO of a company who uses a technique that might resonate with some people. It's kind of like a vision board. Vision boards, whatever. I don't need to go on a backstory about vision boards and what I think about that, but it's like a visual marker. He was materializing something. So he had spent a lot of time of thinking about what are his like 3 priorities and 3 driving motives that he wants to have sort of in mind to guide his decisions when he's sitting in the CEO seat. So he came up with visual icons that reflected each of those 3 guiding motives, and then like had a graphic designer or maybe himself like compile them into like a monogram of sorts that was a composite of the 3 visual reminders of his 3 guiding motives. And as I was talking to him, and he said he puts it somewhere where he can see, especially when he's in negotiations with other businesses, to remind himself of what his 3 driving principles are. And then he was like, and it's here right now with me. And I was like, oh, where? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you because it's for me. This is like my visual reminder in a place where I know where it is, that I know that I will see when I'm having really tough conversations. But I need to be reminded of my values. And I just like stopped listening at that point because it's like trying to look at his bookshelf all behind him or like in his art. Where is this little secret token? But that's a strategy too. If there's things that like this will put me back on my path, not necessarily on the trail. I mean, that might need like you got to stake out your 100 miles in advance and continue to plop down little visual icons on the trees or something. I mean, maybe go for it, but as you're in training or as you're going about your day and you're at home and you might need some reminders to help keep you psyched up, that might be one strategy to use.
I was guessing it was tattooed on his forearm, but like, which
he has on sleeves. I didn't know. And I wasn't going to ask him to change his wardrobe for me.
Yeah, that's an option for runners too, I guess. Yeah. So it's always with you.
Yeah, that's true.
You write about how maybe not athletes in particular, but people tend to be pretty bad at gauging progress. What do we tend to get wrong? So I also feel like this sits at like attention at a time when particularly athletes are tracking everything, heart rate, volume, everything. What do you think people misunderstand about how to calibrate progress towards a goal?
Negativity dominance is a thing. It is a cognitive heuristic.
Tell me more.
Yeah, it's a cognitive heuristic that we use that pops up, that is hard to avoid. It's just that the bad looms larger than the good. And you can think evolutionarily, like, why would that be the case? Why is it all the bad stuff gets more of our attention, captures more of our brains, remembered more, has a bigger hedonic impact on us than the good does? Maybe because it helps keep us alive. Like if we don't pay attention to the tiger that's out there, the snake that's at our foot, then somebody's going to eat us or bite us or something like that. So it's a good thing that we're hyper vigilant for the threats, for the suggestions of defeat, for the things that could harm us. And maybe that's how we stayed alive. And that's why our brain has evolved to have this negativity dominance. Other people have taken this idea of negativity dominance and looked at it in terms of like relationships and how many pieces of like, interpersonal, like platonic or intimate relationships, and like how many compliments does it take to deal with one insult? Right? It's like 7 to 1. Like you need
that feels right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels low,
Yeah.
honestly.
It feels low. I was going to say, depends on the strength of those compliments and who's giving them and how bad is that insult. But that's the point, right? It's just that ratio is highly skewed. Like bad hurts more than good helps. No, and if that's how our brain is wired, then that's our challenge is like, well, how do we undo that then? Let me back up and say like that might manifest in terms of like where the dips are in our performance that gets overweighted than where the peaks are. Right. And maybe we just need to reorient our attention, because also evolutionarily, if we didn't give any attention to things that were rewarding or that were helpful, we will still die. If you never pay attention to where the berries are and only look for the tiger that's trying to eat you, you're going to die from starvation. If you never look for the clean water that you can drink and you're only concerned about the berries that might poison you, you're still going to die, right? So we still need to pay attention to those things that are positive and that are rewarding, despite the fact that our brain has a tendency to overweight the things that are harmful.
That is great advice for life. Actually, thank you.
There's
Makes
lots
me
of
want
ways
to take
to
up the drums.
There's lots of ways to die. That's the takeaway.
Trailhead podcast. So
Yes.
many ways to die.
It's the title of your next book, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm curious if there's a perceptual trick that you use in daily life that other people maybe don't know about, or maybe that feels like underrated. I imagine as someone, doing research, taking up the drums, being a parent, a lot of those things do require some of the like macro goal setting that still applies to athletes. What do you use personally that you find effective in your own life?
I don't know what's effective. I feel like I'm just struggling day by day, like all the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah, I know, right? Just like medical doctors, like still get the common cold, right? Like motivational doctors still are trying to figure it all out.
It's really hoping you could just tell me that like using a gratitude journal or like cold plunging would make me a superstar or a genius, but
well, the New York Times told me yesterday cold plunging will not. I just read that article that do it if you like it, but don't do it because you think it's going to help your body recover faster than if you did cold plunge.
It's disappointing.
It is disappointing because that just feels like it would be so easy. But who gets access to all that ice? Okay, whatever. I digress. I try to be really mindful of how I curate my visual environment. And that pops up in a lot of ways. When my first child was born and we were like, designing his nursery, we had this huge bureau and we just filled it with books and kept the doors open. I mean, he can't even sit up. He can't even keep his eyes open. And yet it was because I wanted, like, when he goes to bed and when he wakes up at night, the first thing he's going to see is books. First thing that we see when we go in there is going to be books, right? And so, like, suggesting that that's an important part of our life with him, that was one way of doing that. Also, when he can start to crawl, then what can he crawl towards? He can crawl toward the books. So, so that's something that, 10 years later now is still a part of what his room includes, is just a visual reminder about books and the importance of education, blah, 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 all of it, all the big goals that could be relevant to. When I curate our refrigerator, I'm mindful of how tall my husband is and what he needs to be eating, and that he doesn't look beyond the first plane. I'm in a red circle.
Wow.
This is amazing tips. Set your baby's goals, set your husband's goals. I love this.
I mean, he can eat on his own, but sometimes he might need some nuts.
What a good boy.
Nice job. But like sometimes it's unintentional, especially when there's many people that are rummaging through the fridge. Like how it ends up getting organized might be unintended, but can still have consequences for the things that we choose. Like anything that gets pushed to the back ends up rotting back there, right? And what gets pushed to the back, like maybe the hummus or like maybe the red apples when you really like green apples, whatever. The stuff you don't like ends up not being at the forefront, but that stuff you might not like might be the stuff that you really should be eating. When we moved to a new apartment and we had our second child, then like there were drawers that were really low. And so that's where all the shitty snacks, that's where
You can say that.
No,
That's
you
fine.
can say shitty
Fine.
snacks. Yeah,
That's where all of the stuff that like, okay, this isn't part of what I want to eat, but like it's fine for kids in moderation. Goldfish crackers, right? Like I think there's no value for me in goldfish crackers. There's not value for them either, but like whatever. So that goes like at my foot level, right? It's going to be more annoying for me to bend down all the way to my foot, passing over other multiple drawers, but it's something that's right at their level, right? So, how you curate your pantry, what you see predicts what you do. So if we want to make changes to what we're eating, how we're spending our time, do you put your phone next to your bed or do you put it out in the living room when you're going to sleep? Does that change? Does that change what's the first thing you do in the 5 minutes that you wake up? And might that have trickle down effects for what the rest of your morning looks like? Of course it would. Do you wake up right away and look at your email to see how mad your boss got at 3 a.m. and that's how you start your day?
Feels oddly personal, but okay. Very
For
specific.
example, just as a hypothetical.
For argument's sake.
For argument's sake.
If you're someone who obsessively checks email and just houses goldfish all day, if this person exists.
If that person exists and they're in our family. So, if it feels like something isn't right or I'm hitting a roadblock, maybe it's time to do that sort of like visual inventory and see like, all right, now I'm going to go through this with a critical eye. I'm going to go through my life space. Where do I spend most of my time? And what have I become blind to? Inattentional blindness is a thing. You see some things so much that you become blind to them. There is a pile over there that is so annoying to me. And it's been this box that is housed 8 years of my kids' artwork because I don't know what to do with it. I can't throw it away. It's so precious, but I don't know what to do with it. And now it's migrated to a corner floor. And it's like really in the way. And but it's there. And so I don't see it, except it bothers me when I do finally see it, right? When I'm like intentionally aware of it, it's like, Jesus, I got to deal with that. It's been 8 years. I need a strategy. This isn't working. And so when we start to feel like something is off, maybe that's a way for us to intervene, is just to start thinking about, what am I not seeing here? What's here that I'm not experiencing seeing, but is having an impact on me that I might not be aware of?
Well, those are all the questions I have for you, Brendan. Anything else to close us out here?
I'm good. That was wonderful. Thank you. And also it's like 10 o'clock. So, or
masterclass.
Or
Yeah.
about an hour. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like this was such a cool way to hear a little bit more about goal setting, particularly for those of us who tend to bite off more than we can chew. Bringing that finish line a little bit closer.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Trailhead. If you love this episode, leave us a review. Share it with your trail crew and make sure to subscribe so you never miss an adventure. Give us a follow on Instagram at TrailheadPod. And you can reach us anytime at trailhead@ultrasignup.com. We'd love to hear your stories, questions, guest ideas, or just to say hi. And don't forget to check out all of the shows in the Ultra Podcast Network. We're building something special, and it's just for you. We'll see you every other week, right here on the Trailhead.